if you could roster one of those two speculative guys, Shedeur Sanders or Tyler Shuck, I feel like we're back to the NFL draft talk here. Joe, pick one of them. You have to.
Shuck. Like,
yeah,
I think the Saints are a little bit better offense.
Yeah, Kellen Moore runs a faster pace offense. I think they have a little bit, better weapons overall at wide receiver. We get to play in a dome. We don't have to deal with that Cleveland weather in November. The wind is howling. So, yeah, I'm with Joe. Let's go Shuck.
What? Why are you shaking your head?
You're welcome.
Week 9 waiver wire additions and deep sleepers for you to add to your fantasy football rosters. Theo Greminger with Tom Brawley and Joe Dolan every single week, Fantasy Football Daily on the Fantasy Points Podcast Network. Guys, we'll start out with a somber tone here. Cam Skattebo done for the season, an absolutely gruesome injury. The Giants just are having terrible injury luck this year. Malik Neighbors done a few weeks back. Now Cam Skattebo done for the year. Two of the emerging stars in the NFL, young players going down with season-ending injuries. If Tyrone Tracy is still available to you on your waiver wire, Tom, is this a push all the chips in type ad? Last year we saw Tracy have some really strong production and have a number of fantasy viable weeks. He was the second most productive running back in last year's rookie class to only Bucky Irving. How enthusiastic would you be about adding him this week?
I think it is the type of situation where you do want to go all in. We're getting to the second half of the year. We're kind of over that midway point for the fantasy regular season. So if not when, then when. I have no idea when else you would do it. I mean, this is the time. Cam Skattebo had taken over that backfield. Tyrone Tracy had kind of been pushed to the side, but it looks like it's going to be his backfield moving forward. Singletary we'll mix in some, but Tracy was pretty successful in this role, as you said, as a rookie. Averaged 13.1 fantasy points per game, RB 21 in the back half of the year since he basically took over the job starting in week 5 last year. So very viable. It's not going to be an RB1 type. He's not going to put up the kind of production that Skattebo was doing, but we saw pretty clearly in that game after the injury, it was mostly Tyrone Tracy. It was like 75 to 80% of the snaps went to Tracy. So I think they're going to give him a chance. And we saw at the beginning of the year, they kind of gave him the job, and then he hurt his shoulder on that Sunday night game in week 3. And Skattebo kind of jumped into the lineup and kind of ran away with the job. So the coaching staff here does think highly of Tyrone Tracy. So I think this is a team that wants some of their younger players to play. And Singletary, we all kind of know what he is at this point. Giants aren't going anywhere. They're not going to the postseason. So I think they're going to give Tracy all the run that he can take the rest of the season here. So yeah, if I am, and he might be available in your league. There was a lot of buys last week. We use a 50% threshold in my waiver wire article, and he fell below that because of all the buys last week. So if you're in like a 10-team league, you're probably not available. He might be available in that format. 12-team league, he might be. So make sure you take a look. He might have been dropped over the bye week.
Yeah, and if you've been stashing Tyrone Tracy, I think he immediately goes into your fantasy lineup. I think he's going to be one of the focal points. Joe, what are your thoughts on how this Giants offense is going to look forward, how they might utilize Tracy?
I think it's going to look similar. Obviously, he has a different skill set than Cam Skattebo, but he also can contribute in the passing game as a former wide receiver. We saw that last year. I would think that the split is going to be pretty similar to what it was from Skattebo to Tracy, now from Tracy to Devin Singletary, who Devin Singletary, by the way, he's almost guaranteed to be available in your league. If you're in a deeper league and you might want somebody who has a chance to just get some snaps. He made a downfield catch when he was really tightly covered last night or on Sunday against the Eagles. But I think Tracy probably is going to fall into the RB2 flex range. As Tom said, he is a quote-unquote not in my league, bro, but I had a caller to the SiriusXM morning show on Monday who said, yeah, good news for me. I picked up Troy Franklin, who was the number 1 receiver for the week. Bad news for me. I dropped Tyrone Tracy to do it. There are people who probably had to drop Tyrone Tracy when they didn't want to. Good fantasy players who had no choice because they needed somebody to fill in a wide receiver spot this week. So just be vigilant. Even if you think the big names that we talk about on this show are never available in your league, there is always a chance with these 6 bye weeks and all the injuries that we had that somebody dropped somebody they would have preferred not to drop.
Yeah, that's a great point, Joe. And Devin Singletary, I think if you're in one of these deeper FFPC, NFFC leagues, I know earlier in the season, Tyrone Tracy was dealing with a shoulder injury earlier in the year. So if there's a re-aggravation, you could see a Devin Singletary being fantasy viable at some point this year. It seems like every year we have to talk about Singletary on the waiver wire. We remember a few years back in Houston, really impactful for him there. Let's talk about a former New York Giant. Saquon Barkley had an incredible game yesterday, but there was an injury scare late in the game. Doesn't seem like it's anything too serious. He jogged off the field at the end of the game. But, Joe, we have clarity now on sort of how the pecking order would go behind Saquon Barkley. Yep. I think with the way that Tank Bigsby ran the ball and considering the draft capital that they gave up for Bigsby to acquire him earlier in the year, and I know a lot of that was special teams focused, but 9 carries for 104 yards, 11.6 yards per carry. Bigsby, especially if you're rostering Barkley, I think should be a priority handcuff.
Yeah, he's the guy. And honestly, Theo, he might have made one of the critical plays of that game. Jalen Hurts took an awful sack to drop from I think it was from 1st and 10 to like 2nd and 28, and then Tank Bigsby ran for 29 yards to pick up the first down on the next play. He ran hard. He was tough to bring down. By the way, this is the first time, guys, since the Eagles did it in 2013 that a quarterback threw for 4 touchdown passes while 2 running backs each ran for 100 yards for the same team. So it goes to show you what kind of offensive performance that was. The Eagles offensive linemen have been saying for weeks, we are almost there with the run game, and it showed up with a season best performance. It doesn't look like Saquon Barkley is going to miss time, but maybe that groin tightens up for him over the bye. Tank Bigsby could be the lead dog against the Packers coming out in Week 10.
Yeah, and I think there's going to be a certain level of safety with how Philadelphia is going to handle Saquon Barkley, especially when we get to the stretch run. Philly has big aspirations for where they're headed. The defending Super Bowl champions are not going to be risky with a player as important to them for Saquon Barkley. So you might get a spot start out of Tank Bigsby. Looks very good running the ball again in this offense. And with the threat of Jalen Hurts, I think that Bigsby could put up strong RB2 numbers any single week he's a starter. We can't even speculate on this one. We already talked about Cam Scattaboo being done for the year. The fantasy gods can't possibly take away Kayshon Judkins as well, but shoulder injuries are tricky. Tom, your enthusiasm for adding Dylan Sampson. Now, Cleveland's headed to their bye week, and we have a little bit of a lack of clarity. We record this on Monday morning, so hopefully we get a very positive report on Kayshon Judkins maybe later this afternoon. But Dylan Sampson had the most touches that he's had since week 1, and Sampson catches the ball well. We saw him produce early in the season. Your enthusiasm level for adding him as a speculative add this week?
Yeah, it's definitely worth it. Judkins has been kind of the engine for this offense for the Browns since he returned since he entered the lineup in week 2, and the offense kind of sputtered without him yesterday against that tough Patriots run defense. So we'll see how long he's going to miss. Some of the talk online was that maybe it was an AC sprain, so maybe it won't be an extended absence, but sometimes these shoulder injuries, especially for backs and a bigger back like Kayshon Judkins that's using those shoulders quite a bit, maybe they might err on the little bit of side of caution here and rest him for a little bit longer. So they do have their bye this week, so he does have 2 weeks to get healthy again. But it looks like Sampson's going to be the guy here. At least he was in the second half of the game whenever Judkins left the lineup. The Browns are also, they've been wheeling and dealing all year too. So they could potentially trade Jerome Ford next week at the November 4th trade deadline. So even if they, even if Judkins does play in week 10, they could still thin out this backfield a little bit and trade Jerome Ford. So now is the time, I think, to add him. as you said, he can contribute in the passing game, and we're seeing with this offense, they're usually playing from behind. So maybe he even carves out a little bit of a role in the second half of the season if they don't want to overextend Judkins. Maybe he can get on the field in more passing situations. So I think his stock is rising entering the second half of the season.
Yeah, Sampson, again, a very talented pass catcher, at least at the NFL level, what we've seen. And Cleveland used that 4th-round pick on him after selecting Judkins in the 2nd round. Feels like the second half of the year, we're going to continue to see this youth movement in Cleveland. Harold Fannin, unbelievably good-looking player. But I think both rookie running backs getting touches makes a lot of sense, and you get that contingent upside. Joe, there's a lot of cryptic mystery surrounding Bucky Irving right now, where there's pictures ending up on X with pictures of him with a shoulder sling attachment, dealing with multiple injuries right now. There's we knew about the foot injury. The shoulder injury is also problematic. So there's 2 injuries he's dealing with. Rachaad White has been really, really good. But yesterday, we finally saw Sean Tucker be the most productive Tampa Bay back. A season high 12 carries against the New Orleans Saints, gets a rushing score. Tampa Bay is going on to their bye week. So again, your roster needs to have space to be able to add Sean Tucker this week. What would be your enthusiasm level for him? Is he a player that's going to mix in like we saw yesterday? Or was this just because they were playing the Saints? Maybe the game flow dictated getting him extra carry opportunities.
Yeah, I'm not really sure how to suss this one out, Theo, because really, go look at the box score from that game. The Buccaneers won 23-3. The Saints averaged 3.9 yards per play, but the Buccaneers actually averaged fewer yards per play than the Saints did. They won that game on the strength of their defense. And I just wonder if it was a team that now is running on fumes. They just happen to have a really good matchup to be running on fumes in. But look at what happened to the 49ers, right? All those injuries finally coalesced and coagulated, and they laid a stinker. Well, the Buccaneers would have done the same thing if they had a competent opponent this week. So Baker Mayfield had a rough game again. Sean Tucker was the only player on that team to top 10 fantasy points outside of their defense. So I just think it was more of a game flow type of thing. He would be behind Tracy and behind, obviously, Dylan Sampson on my priority list. I think he's probably in the Devin Singletary, Jerome Ford kind of, I don't have the main course, but I can get the appetizer type of mix here. But we'll see about Bucky Irving. The 2 weeks probably is a good sign for Bucky Irving, though.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I mean, I'd be surprised if Bucky Irving can't get back after the bye week. And we know we have a big issue if he's not out there on the field in week 10. And another player I think I would have ahead, certainly, of Sean Tucker, and a player that we've been telling everyone to add for a number of weeks because of trade speculation and because of his skill set. Breece Hall was fantastic yesterday. If this was, in fact, Breece Hall's last game as a New York Jet, he certainly went out in style. 3 fourth-quarter touchdowns, including a passing touchdown, 33 PPR points. But Isaiah Davis had his mini breakout game. We talked about his role as a receiver, 5 catches for 44 yards on a really non-existent passing game for New York. And he also adds 7 carries for 65 yards, most of which came on 1 long run. Tom, with New York heading into a bye week, is Isaiah Davis a priority stash for you? You have the potential with the Hall trade, and even if he doesn't get traded, it seems like an offense that needs to work in 2 backs because of their limitations in the passing games.
Yeah, and just the way that the Jets, they fall behind a lot. Most weeks here, they're just getting their first win this past weekend against the Bengals. So they're playing from behind a lot, and it's actually gotten him on the field. It's just the quarterback situation with Justin Fields has been a little bit untenable, and they haven't been able to really get the backs the ball in the passing game very much. But he has gotten to 2 catches in 4 of his last 5 games, and he's getting reps in the passing game. So he's starting to build a little bit of some standalone value next to Breece Hall. But the bigger reason to stash him is if they do move on from Breece Hall before the November 4th trade deadline. We'll see if that actually happens. The Jets should be looking to sell pieces here, to get draft picks, to kind of load up and build this team through the draft next year. So we'll see if they actually follow through and do that. But he's been kind of earning a role no matter what. And we saw at the beginning of the season as well with Braylon Allen. They didn't really want to give Breece Hall a bell cow type of role, even when Braylon Allen was healthy. So, Aaron Glenn comes from that Detroit background where they did use two backs, with David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. So I think it is in his blood to use two backs each week here. So we're starting to see Davis carve out a little bit of a role, even if Breece Hall doesn't get traded.
Yeah, he's a very, very interesting player, second year back. Another rookie running back, Joe, that we were very excited about before the season started was Ollie Gordon. Now, certainly, I think maybe we were a little too enthusiastic. Gordon had not broke 10 PPR points in any week prior to Sunday's game against Atlanta. There was a lot of speculation from the Miami Dolphins beat reporters that we were going to see Miami try to utilize a second back, try to establish the run against the Falcons, and they certainly did that. Devon Achane continues to put up big numbers, another 20-point week for him. But Ollie Gordon, season high 10 carries for 46 yards, also adds a catch that went 20 yards and a touchdown. I'm sort of enthusiastic about adding Ollie Gordon. Darren Waller's now on the injured reserve, and just looking at sort of the touches for this offense, besides Devon Achane and Jalen Waddle, it would make sense getting Ollie Gordon this sort of double-digit touches every week moving forward. Are you there with him, or is he still a little bit more of a this is a handcuff kind of play to you?
I think he's still more of a handcuff. Now, they also had the speculation, Theo, you have to remember that they said, we're going to get Jalen Wright more involved. And on the Dolphins opening drive, they actually gave a carry to all three running backs. Now, Jalen Wright finished this game with 9 rush attempts. That's a little fraudulent because they were up by 3 scores. And I think Jalen Wright got like the final 5 or 6 rush attempts of the game in the fourth quarter. Ollie Gordon was the guy more involved early in the game. He had multiple carries in the first quarter. He had a 20-yard touchdown reception in this game. The biggest concern I have is this is the Dolphins' best offensive performance in a calendar year. And Mike McDaniel's been answering questions about his job status, and he's been answering questions about Tua Tagovailoa's status as the starting quarterback here. Is that all going to change after one game? Well, he's not going to get asked about it this week, but we have to remember how bad this offense was playing. So Ollie Gordon, to me, is more of a priority handcuff. They do have a good matchup with the Ravens this week. So at home, so we'll see if they're able to keep that going. But maybe he's a flex option for desperation, but more of a handcuff.
Yeah, I think I'm there with you. I'd still be very happy to have him rostered. But again, if Devon Achane went down, I think Ollie Gordon would dominate the touches. Jalen Wright, we've seen him now for 2 seasons. Ollie Gordon is the guy. Another player that's very, very interesting, Keaton Mitchell, just because I liked him during the summer. We saw 4 carries, 43 yards. Is this the start of something, or is this just a player to keep on the back of your bench? And if Derrick Henry were to go down with an injury, I think Keaton Mitchell would be fantasy viable. Your thoughts on this one, Tom? You talked about a lack of self-awareness and self-scouting their own talent in Baltimore in the pre-show.
Yeah, I think he's still more of a stash at this point behind Derrick Henry, but it was promising to see him at least get, he's active. I mean, that was a problem earlier in the season. Rasheen Ali was, he was dressing ahead of him and playing in some special teams, and Keaton Mitchell wasn't. So this was some progress out of their bye that he was up and healthy, on the roster here, and did get 4 carries. But it's still, we know Derrick Henry's going to consume most of the carries in this backfield most weeks. And Justice Hill has, this passing game work kind of locked up for now. So I still view Mitchell as a handcuff to Derrick Henry at this point. But maybe we do start to see him. We'll see if this week on Thursday Night Football, if they continue to give him some work, maybe he can start to carve out some standalone value. But for me right now, he's still more of a handcuff.
Yeah, and Joe, a player that we've talked about for a couple of weeks here as a handcuff, sort of flashed a little bit of handcuff plus ability in the win over the Pittsburgh Steelers on Sunday Night Football, and that's Emmanuel Wilson. And Wilson sort of dominated Josh Jacobs in rushing yardage production. He had 61 rushing yards, Jacobs only 33 yards, and Jacobs sort of saved his week with a rushing score. Emmanuel Wilson is interesting. This is an offense that's scoring points and a coaching staff that seems to like him. Your enthusiasm level for Wilson versus maybe a couple of the names we've talked about already.
Well, it's to take advantage of an opportunity, right? And Josh Jacobs has been dinged up of late. He had an illness last week, and really, he has looked sluggish here the last couple of weeks, and that would be my concern. So I think Emmanuel Wilson, over a guy like an Ollie Gordon or a Keaton Mitchell, that is particularly interesting to me if I need a 1 week fill-in type of guy, because I simply trust the Green Bay Packers a little bit more. Jordan Love was awesome, and I know that Steeler defense, sorry, Tom, has been abominable this year.
It's trash.
Yeah, but Jordan Love has been playing some really good football. They have a matchup against Carolina in week number 9, a team that just got debacled by James Cook on the ground. I think Emmanuel Wilson is a really sneaky 1 week fill-in if you have a Saquon Barkley on bye, or if you have Breece Hall on bye this coming week, and you're still waiting for Bucky Irving to come back. I think he is a really interesting 1 week fill-in.
Yeah, he's definitely an interesting player. And certainly, like you bring up the bye weeks, just as a reminder, you have the Browns, Jets, Eagles, and Bucks this week. Week 10, you have Cincinnati, Dallas, Kansas City, and Tennessee. So we get through by Mageddon, but we still have 2 back-to-back weeks with tricky 4 teams on byes each. Let's quickly wrap up a couple of other names. Bam Knight is interesting because I think in week 9, we're going to potentially using him as a spot starter against the Dallas Cowboys. But the player that's very interesting to comb the waiver wire for, Trey Benson. If you're in a league with no injured reserve spots and Benson is out there, I think Trey Benson has a chance to return to a very prominent role if he happens to be sitting on your wire. Maybe not this week, but I think maybe in a week or two, Benson's going to be a player that is sort of locked in for the end of the season. And we'll also mention Amir Abdullah, the greatest show on turf, part 2. The highest scoring offense in the NFL is the Indianapolis Colts. But DJ Giddens was inactive yesterday. It appears like Amir Abdullah is now the handcuff behind the league winner in Jonathan Taylor. If you want to level your game up over the second half of the season, if you want to make a push towards your fantasy playoffs and compete for a fantasy football championship, Fantasy Points is the best place to find winning information that can help you in all formats. If you're a DFS player, if you're a dynasty player, if you're a redraft player, or if you want Tom Brawley's gambling picks, which have been red hot on fire, level your game up at Fantasy Points. All of our packages are discounted, and you can get an additional discount using the code Theo and get 15% off all of our amazing packages. And these make fantastic gifts. If you want to get somebody a Christmas gift, a Hanukkah gift, a birthday present, consider a subscription to Fantasy Points. Give the gift of winning fantasy football at fantasypoints.com. Hey, guys, we try to be a week ahead, and we've been really good about this throughout the season. Anybody who's been following our show, we've tried to give you the player to add before a bunch of other talking heads are going to say, go push the 30% in on this guy. We talked about Chimere Dike, and I think we were all pretty enthusiastic about him last week, just based on the lack of playmakers on this Tennessee offense. Chimere Dike, with his speed and now his role, dare I say it, he's the only Tennessee Titan I would consider putting in my fantasy lineup. 4th round pick out of Florida. Tom, your enthusiasm level, very solid week in week 7 and took it to another level in week 8. And we also have the added bonus of the manufactured rush attempts that we should see basically on a weekly basis.
Yeah, he does get some of those design touches in targets in this offense. And why wouldn't you? He's one of the few players that's actually making weekly plays outside of Tyjae Spears and a little bit of Tony Pollard right now. So DK is making plays. And we saw without Calvin Ridley, this is the second week in a row without Calvin Ridley, those snaps went up. He was like more of a part-time player in week 7. I think he was about a 60% snap share, all the way up to 90% snap share. They made him a full-time player this past week, and he continued to make plays. He finishes with the 93 receiving yards and 7 catches. And I think this is, he's the one thing that's one guy that's really given this offense some juice, and they're trying to, they're developing Cam Ward right now, so they need some playmakers out there. Tyler Lockett, we got that little piece of news before week 8. I know that didn't really move the needle too much, but he did get his release from the Titans, so that did clear out this receiving core a little bit. And they have one more game here before their bye. So I don't think we're going to see Calvin Ridley this week, but I do think out of the bye, if he has another solid game here, I think he's gonna pass Alec Pierce to be the second wide receiver in 2 wide receiver sets once Calvin Ridley's healthy. I mean, I wouldn't put him back on the bench. So I think it's tough to get too excited because we're still talking about the Titans offense. They're not going to score a lot of points there. But if they do show some signs of improvement in the second half of the season, I think DK is going to be a big part of that. And maybe he can be a wide receiver 3 and maybe with a little bit of upside to be a wide receiver 2 if he really takes this job and kind of runs with it. So I hope you picked him up in some spots last week, and you still have the opportunity. You're only 8% owned right now in Yahoo leagues. So he's one of the wide receivers. It's been kind of a meh wide receiver waiver wire for a couple of weeks, but he's a kind of player I would put at the top of my queue at wide receiver and hope to hit a little bit of a home run here in the second half of the season.
And Joe, we see this. Like, it feels like there's guys like Chimere Dike who pop every year, and there's always a player like this that's in our lineups in the fantasy football playoffs. I mean, the speed, the 8 targets, and they're going to be trailing in every single game. Why not take a couple of YOLO balls downfield to the super speedy wide receiver who you're also giving manufactured touches to?
Yeah. By the way, he is their primary slot receiver. So that is something that you're going to have to analyze going forward. His slot rate was 76% in week number 8, which is a decline from week 7 when it was 81%, but it's still an overwhelming number. I actually had a prop bet on Alec Pierce in this game against this Colts secondary. It hit, but it was the wrong bet to make. The bet to make was on DK, who was at 26.5, 10 yards behind Pierce. That number is going to flip in the Titans next game. DK will have the higher prop, and I think it just shows that this guy was clearly Cam Ward's go-to player if you're watching that game. And look, I know Cam Ward has had his struggles. Who wouldn't on this team? But he's found a player that he trusts, and he can trust to create big plays as opposed to just dinking and dunking down the field. Yeah, I think DK he's a must-roster player at this stage.
100%. And this is why, again, not to keep patting ourselves on the back, but when we mention a player, you can add them speculatively. You don't have to always chase the top FAAB guy of the week. Add these players like DK. Now you're going to see guys. I mean, I'm seeing him available. I picked him up in a ton of leagues, but I'm seeing him available in some FFPC leagues still. He's going to be like a 25% waiver wire ad in some of these deeper leagues. You could have added him last week as like a 5% guy. So when Joe Dolan, Tom Brawley, or I tell you to be a week ahead on a guy, pay attention. And I'll give Joe big props on this one, because a couple weeks back, you made a point of adding Christian Watson to the show sheet because he returned to practice. Now, Christian Watson leads Green Bay in receiving yardage last night. 85 receiving yards doesn't look like he's at all hobbled for a guy that had a torn ACL not that long ago. 25 years old. They gave Christian Watson a contract extension this past offseason. They wanted to make sure that they retained him despite drafting Matthew Golden in the first round, then Savion Williams in the third round. They added a number of young wide receivers, but it seems like Christian Watson is well ahead of these guys. Are we supposed to get excited about Christian Watson right now, Joe? Is this like a tip of the iceberg where 4 targets could turn into 9 next week? Or is this something where we want to temper our expectations?
Thank you for the props, Theo, but I might kind of circle back a little bit. The number 1 receiver in Green Bay is Tucker Kraft. Make no mistake about that. It was the case last night. It's going to continue to be the case. And look at the targets. Jordan Love, 37 pass attempts. Here are the wide receiver targets in that game. Christian Watson, 4. Romeo Doubs, 6. Malik Heath, 3. Savion Williams, 1. Matthew Golden, 3. it feels like we have been through this song and dance a dozen times over the past 3 years in the Jordan Love era in Green Bay. So look, if I'm going to pick up a guy who could go 4 for 80 or 1 for 10, I'm going to pick up a guy who's tied to a good offense, and that is Christian Watson. But I do still feel great. By the way, great debut. But not only has this guy always been hurt in his career, he's been a part-time player, kind of rotational. Dontavion Wicks wasn't even active in that game. So they still had 5 receivers with multiple targets, wide receivers. That doesn't even count the running backs and tight ends. It really does feel like fool's gold, and it's going to be tough to pick which week to start Christian Watson.
Tucker Kraft is an absolute monster. I mean, unbelievable. I think when I do a dynasty update, Joe, I think he's a tight end 3 in dynasty behind only Bowers and McBride. He's unbelievable. And I agree with you there. Can we at least say, though, Tom, that Christian Watson, if you're going to roster a wide receiver in Green Bay, would you prefer Watson to Matthew Golden, who was non-existent last night, and Romeo Doubs, who's been pretty good? But again, Watson, I think a little bit more of a natural talent, a little bit more of a player that we would bank on to put up a big fantasy number if we're chasing a Packers wide receiver.
Oh, that's a tough one. I think I'd still have Romeo Doubs. We saw it last year. He always leads them in routes and snaps in a given week. He has stepped up his game a little bit this season. So I don't see him losing that top spot. I think he's going to be the most consistent. And we have seen him earlier this year, and he's a great end zone target, red zone target for Jordan Love. So I'd still give Doubs the edge here, but it is going to be a headache most weeks here. We haven't even talked about Jaden Reed, who will probably be back sometime in late November. Dontavion Wicks, as Joe said, he was out last night, so he could be back in the next week or two from his calf injury. So just be prepared if you've been using any Packers wide receiver with any regularity here over the last couple of weeks. It's about to turn into a major headache most weeks because that was a unique game. They were behind against the Steelers. They never throw it more than 30 times a game. They threw it 37 times last night. They usually play from ahead. So this is a situation where it's going to probably drive you nuts more than anything. But Watson, certainly, I mean, we've seen it throughout his career. He's able to create these downfield plays. He's one of those guys, if you stick in your lineup, yeah, he could get you just 2 or 3 points, but he can go off at any time too and score you 20 fantasy points. So just be prepared if you pick up Watson. That's what's coming down the road here in the next couple of weeks for the Packers.
And Joe, you like talking about the mess at Green Bay in terms of all the targeted wide receivers. Let's talk about an even uglier situation. Nico Collins missed yesterday's game with concussion. Give us your favorite Houston Texans wide receiver. So just a little context here for the listeners. Xavier Hutchinson has 5 catches for 69 yards and a touchdown, leads them in scoring. But you also have second-round pick Jaden Higgins with a season-high 8 targets, catches 4 of them for 34 yards and a touchdown. And then the most consistent player in a 2-week period has been Jalen Knoll, a third-round pick, also Iowa State Cyclone, is like played with Higgins. But Jalen Knoll with 4 catches for 77 yards in week 7, 5 catches for 63 in week 8, 11 PPR points plus in back-to-back weeks. If you could roster any of those 3, which would it be?
Glad you asked Joe and not me.
I know it's an ugly one. I think I have an opinion, but
I think it's Higgins. He led the team in routes with 33. And then it's probably Hutchinson. I would love to say Knoll, but Knoll he ran just 19 routes. Now, he was very productive on those routes, but he ran just 19 of them. As a matter of fact, this little highlight of failure in a league of mine where I was dying at wide receiver. I picked up Xavier Hutchinson, and then at the last minute, I dropped him for David Sills because I bought into the Kirk Cousins narrative. I think I'm going to win anyway because I got Jahan Dotson, Mawson. I had to play Jahan Dotson and David Sills in the same lineup.
Week.
But no, I think it's Jaden Higgins, Theo. And I'm interested to hear your guys' opinions. He led them in routes. Now, that, of course, could go down when Nico Collins comes back. So do they view him as more of the direct backup to Nico Collins is the concern, and Xavier Hutchinson, because he's a veteran, he's the guy who ends up being the number 2 receiver. But I think Higgins is my favorite to roster. By the way, The most encouraging thing, if I have a Texans wide receiver, is that was the best CJ Stroud has looked in quite some time.
Yeah, for sure. Tom, your thoughts on our favorite wide receiver room in football?
Yeah, I'm with Joe here. Higgins would be like if we're looking long term here, but if it's just like a week or two and maybe you just need a fill in, I think Knoll is the guy I would prefer for the next week or two. Braxton Berrios suffered a concussion yesterday. Christian Kirk, he's been having these soft tissue injuries all year here. So, and Knoll's the one guy really making plays the last 2 weeks. So I think that he's earned some more reps moving forward. And this week, I think he's certainly viable. They're playing blanking on. They have a pretty good slot matchup, I thought, this week. So, yeah, he would be the guy I would look for this week or two. But Jaden Higgins, long term here, he has been playing the most overall. We do expect Christian Kirk back at some point to play the slot. So maybe Higgins can kind of be the guy that emerges a little bit as the rookie wide receiver between the two Iowa State guys here.
Yeah, it's Denver this week, so Patrick Surtain is going to be taking away someone, probably
if
Nico
he plays.
Collins. If
Surtain plays, I mean that could be a huge Nico Collins game, if not.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a very, very good point. I think it's Jalen Knoll for me, guys. I think Jalen Knoll would be the one that I would bet on. It's a lack of overlapping skill sets. You could play him alongside Nico Collins. And we liked him. We liked him a lot at Fantasy Points. We actually had him before the NFL draft. Brett Whitefield and I both had him ahead of Jaden Higgins. Of course, we adjusted post-draft capital, but Jalen Knoll, especially Brett Whitefield, loved Jalen Knoll. Let's talk a little bit more about the wide receivers. Greatest show on turf, Indianapolis Colts. Alec Pierce, we talked about him last week. Another decent performance from him. Josh Downs also caught a touchdown pass. Your thoughts on Pierce? Only 5 targets, catches 2 of them, 69 yards, but he just looks good. Tom, your thoughts on him?
We said it last week. I mean, this guy just keeps making downfield plays every week. He's up to 21.4 yards per reception and 12.1 yards per target. Another great downfield play where he boxes out the defender for the catch. It's just a matter of time. He is running so cold here with touchdowns. You make this many downfield plays, it usually leads to touchdowns, and he just hasn't had that breakthrough quite yet. They do have the Steelers this week, so I would expect that maybe that cold streak to end this week. I could see him burning one of these Steelers dusty cornerbacks this week. So I do like Pierce a lot as another pickup here. He obviously is better for like non-PPR formats. He's not going to rack up a bunch of catches. He's used in a very singular way as a downfield receiver, but he's capable of racking up a lot of yards, and these touchdowns are going to start coming at some point.
Joe, is there any interest whatsoever in Roman Wilson, 3rd round pick in last year's NFL draft, the 2024 draft, Senior Bowl standout, has been literally invisible. Yesterday, he had a 21-yard touchdown grab in garbage time that really helped the final stat line. 4 catches for 74 yards and a touchdown. Or are you just leaving him on the wire for someone else?
The deep league guy. We have seen the Steelers are interested in trading for a wide receiver. What if Aaron Rodgers gets his boy Alan Lazard into town here to be the number 2 receiver next to DK Metcalf? Calvin Austin played in that game, got the 6 targets. I think he's a deep league guy, Theo. Maybe in your dynasty league if somebody had dropped him. But Rodgers is playing pretty well. I'm not gonna sit here and tell you that having a receiver tied to Aaron Rodgers is the worst thing in the world, but he's more of a deep league guy. I feel like he could go back to goose egging next week.
Okay, so 2 guys who are not in my league bro types that are not going to be available in too many FFPC or NFFC leagues, but are certainly going to be available in a lot of ESPN or Sleeper or Yahoo leagues. And I'll pose the same question to both of you guys. Yesterday, Troy Franklin, currently heading into Monday Night Football, he is your wide receiver 1 overall in the week. 6 catches for 89 yards and 2 touchdown grabs. Kayshon Boutte, who we seem to talk about literally every single week on this show, just keeps on scoring touchdowns, now has 4 touchdown grabs in 3 weeks played and has had 13 or more PPR points every single week. And guys, he catches every single one of his targets. I don't know if that's going to lead to an increased number of targets, but certainly there's a lot of efficiency in the Drake May to Kayshon Boutte connection. If you could pick one of these players to add to your fantasy roster for the rest of the season, would it be Troy Franklin or would it be Kayshon Boutte? Let's start out with you on this one, Joe.
Troy Franklin. And here's one of the reasons. The number one, I think New England ultimately wants to be a lower volume passing game. Drake May's MVP quality right now, but I think Troy Franklin moves differently. I think there's a great opportunity for him to take hold of the number 2 receiver job. I believe Marvin Mims is in concussion protocol, so that's going to open up another window for Troy Franklin to make plays. And Bo Nix plays with extreme irrational confidence. And look, as we saw against that, we saw the best and the worst of it. He goes freaking sidearm Stan Belinda on his first pass attempt of the game and throws it 2 yards behind his receiver for an interception, and then he's dropping it in the bucket for 4 touchdowns against Dallas, 2 of which went to Troy Franklin. I just trust well, I don't know if I trust him a little bit more. I just think his skill set is explosive, and they are trying to find the way to get him into the lineup. But Boutte's a fine option as well because he's tied to a guy who's playing like an MVP.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I prefer Boutte just a little bit, and it's mostly because of the quarterback position. Drake May is playing at a top 3, top 5 type of level right now. Bo Nix is like hit or miss from week to week, it seems. Hit or miss from play to play right now. So I like Boutte here. He has been running the most routes and he has been running the most snaps in this offense most weeks. And he's going to be he's going to be more hit or miss than Troy Franklin, who does get those slot targets and he's a little more capable for PPR. But I like Boutte's upside in a given week. And I do think there is a little bit of a developing relationship there between him and Drake May. So I prefer Boutte slightly over Troy Franklin.
Yeah, that Dallas secondary is incredibly beat up right now, and I think we're just basically streaming everyone against Dallas right now. Kayshon Boutte, though, I feel like this is something sustainable where it's difficult for us to chase touchdowns, but there is a real connection there. We also have the added benefit where if Stephon Diggs, an older player, sort of breaks down, I think Boutte would be a way more fantasy managers would be way more enthusiastic about getting a chance to use him on a weekly basis. Also, I think this New England offense is still developing, so I might go Boutte, but I'm also very excited about having Troy Franklin, the locker room narrative, the shower narrative, whatever you want to call it. Franklin has been catching touchdown passes from Bo Nix for several years now, dating back to the time at Oregon. Very interesting stuff there, guys. Very short number of tight ends to talk about. Let's talk about Mason Taylor, Tom. Your thoughts on how he played and your enthusiasm level for him for the rest of the season heading into New York's bye week.
Yeah, that's the unfortunate part. They are on bye this week, but he's been a big piece of that offense, and he's going to have to be moving forward. And, of course, he made the big play at the end of the game. It wasn't a beautiful throw from Breece Hall, but he kind of went over the top for that reception in the end zone. So, yeah, I think ultimately I want them to move to Tyrod Taylor. Justin Fields played a little bit better in week 8, but I do feel like this offense overall and these pass catchers have a better chance for fantasy production if we do see a switch to Tyrod Taylor at some point in the second half of the season. Unfortunately, Fields probably played well enough.
You're gonna have to wait for that because they're on bye, and then Fields
he's gonna get the
start.
He's gonna get the week 10 start. So it's week to week right now with this quarterback situation in New York. So, but yeah, he's certainly the number 2 receiver for this offense moving forward. So he should be picked up and owned in most leagues.
Joe, one player who we talked about very enthusiastically in week 1 and week 2 was Juwan Johnson, who had 28 targets over the first 3 weeks of the season. Really was one of the leading target earners in all of fantasy at the tight end position. Then, of course, sort of came back to earth. Weeks 4, weeks 5, week 6 was non-existent. Now we're seeing 15 targets combined in week 7 and weeks 8. Back-to-back weeks of 5 catches. Your thoughts on Juwan Johnson? Are you sort of back to he's got the role in this offense, we're interested in him, or is this another guy you're just going to throw into the big tight end bucket that you like to talk about every week?
He's a bucket guy, and he is see, this is where I struggle, and I think you always have to admit what you don't know. And Juwan Johnson is one of those guys where I know I could plug him in my lineup and he could go for 5 for 53. But when I pick him up and I start him, I also understand 2 for 11 is right around the corner as well. He is one of those guys. We have no clue what the quarterback situation is going to look like here. I mean, yeah, they finally benched Spencer Rattler, then Tyler Shuck comes in and doesn't perform any better. So I don't know what the Saints are dead. So does Kellen Moore just say we need to see what we have in Tyler Shuck because we've seen enough of Spencer Rattler? I'm not sure. And I don't know if that'll be good for Juwan Johnson because Rattler does uncork it. Like Rattler has great arm strength and he will throw tight window balls. I don't know how much we'll see of that from Shuck. So I really don't have much interest in Juwan Johnson at all right now, but he is a guy you could fill a lineup with him if you need to, but I think that's different than somebody I'm excited to pick up off the waiver wire.
Yeah, I think Juwan Johnson is your break glass in case of emergency tight end. We see them every year, and I think you're sort of chasing a stat line like this. You're chasing 9, 10 PPR points, and if he gives you something above that, you have to be happy about it. I'll quickly mention just trade target players, trade deadline right around the corner. Chig Okonkwo, if he's moved, Gunnar Helm is already seeing a weekly role. We talked about the youth movement in Tennessee. Gunnar Helm is an interesting one for dynasty managers. And then we mention it every single week. If Baltimore does, in fact, trade Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely would be a player that you would be really, really happy to have. And I think a player that would have a big role down the stretch. Let's talk about the quarterback position. We're going to give a quick reminder that at this point, if Joe Flacco is not rostered in your league, it's getting to be a little bit ridiculous. We've been enthusiastic about him for several weeks here. But there's really doesn't need a lot of context here, guys. QB5, QB6, QB15, that's his 3 weekly finishes. And of course, the QB5 is heading into Monday Night Football. But Flacco's just been completely locked in. Let's talk about Tua Tagovailoa.
One thing, Theo, we have to point out, Joe Flacco did hurt his throwing shoulder. And he came back into the game, but I think he went to the locker room to get an injection. That's something we're going to have to monitor.
Yeah, they ran the ball in that final drive. Yeah. There's a lot of people pissed about that, but that was because Joe had a bad throwing shoulder there.
We're not talking about Jake Browning yet, guys. We're not doing that again on this show. We're talking. We're going to stay very positive with Flacco. They're not going to take him away from us. Too many injuries to account for, guys. And again, he did finish out the game. Let's talk about Tua Tagovailoa. And this is a player we rarely talk about, but he did have a very strong performance in week 8. And Miami plays against Baltimore, who's been one of the most generous opposing defenses to opposing signal callers. Tom, your enthusiasm level, if you need a spot start, your trust and enthusiasm for using Tua Tagovailoa this week.
Yeah, I can't say I'm too excited about picking up Tua and playing him this week. He has thrown for multiple touchdowns 5 times this year, but he's shown a lot lower floor this year. He's averaging fewer than 200 passing yards per game. And we saw a little bit. We were talking about Ollie Gordon and Jalen Wright earlier. They're trying to commit more to the running game, which makes sense. You don't have Darren Waller. You don't have Tyreek Hill. So you're really counting on Jalen Waddle to make a big play for you, for him to come through for fantasy. But I do get it. At least we got this Baltimore matchup this week. They've been giving up a lot of production to quarterbacks all season long. I know people are hurting with Jalen Hurts and Baker Mayfield on bye. So he's on the desperation end, but I wouldn't feel too excited about this.
Joe, a player who's going to be going up against Miami this week is Snoop Huntley. It seems insane that they use Cooper Rush before Huntley. Huntley was functional yesterday. Baltimore gets the win. Huntley had some really, really positive moments. You see the rushing production that we've largely associated with him. Gives you 53 rushing yards and was efficient as a passer, 186 passing yards and a touchdown. If it's another week of no Lamar Jackson, how happy would you be to use Huntley?
I would be thrilled to use him, but I think Lamar's going to play. I think they got what they wanted out of Snoop Huntley, and then they decided, and here might have been part of the reason. By the way, they're going to get their asses fined like crazy.
It was very, explain that to the listeners.
For sports bettors, fortunately the Ravens covered even the Lamar Jackson line, so the crisis averted there. But this might have been part of their thinking process, Theo, because I didn't realize this until late yesterday, that they had a short turnaround until Thursday night, and they probably didn't necessarily want Lamar to go out there in week 8 and then have to play again in 3 days. So I think he's going to play, but if Huntley goes, look, they can run the Lamar Jackson offense. It's just not going to be anywhere near as good, but they can run it. And that is a viable fantasy quarterback to me. Like, I'd rather play him than Tua, quite frankly. I mean, like, look, I got burned in a Superflex league this week. I played Carson Wentz over Tua. I would have done it again, like with the way Tua had been playing. So, but if it's another disappointing week for Lamar Jackson and Huntley has to go, yeah, I'll play him. I love, he's the perfect, like, streamer backup quarterback to me.
Yeah, and I think that's a very, very interesting point. And I think one little edge that our listeners can get by with is if you get through your bye week and you're past your bye week, then using your backup on a very functional offense like we're expecting Baltimore to be is a better bye week strategy, or excuse me, a better strategy than having sort of a low-end QB2. So we're recording this before Monday Night Football, but if Jaden Daniels, if you're rostering him, keeping Marcus Mariota as your backup quarterback for the rest of the season, and if you need a spot start, use Mariota, is probably a better idea than using some of the bottom of the barrel guys. And certainly in Baltimore, with a chance for re-aggravation from Lamar Jackson and the like-for-like replacement, at least from a rushing perspective with Huntley, I think that's a strategy I might try to do if I'm in like a 20-man FFPC, NFFC league where it's really hard to pick up viable, high-end backup quarterbacks. 2 winners from yesterday, Tom, Bryce Young and Michael Penix.
Yeah, they certainly were after watching Andy Dalton and Kirk Cousins. They both look like 2 veteran quarterbacks that probably shouldn't be starting NFL games anymore. And so, yeah, Bryce Young, it seemed like this might just be a 1-week injury. So we'll see if he's able to play this week. And if he's anywhere close, we know that he'll be back in the lineup. It doesn't get the easiest matchup against the Packers, but he should at least be in the lineup, and maybe he can run around a little bit and throw for a touchdown pass or 2. Penix has a matchup against the Patriots, probably a little bit easier, but both of these games are on the road. But yeah, Penix, that was kind of a little bit of a surprise when Kirk got announced as the starter here on the weekend. It didn't seem like the Penix injury was too serious, but maybe they thought that they could beat a Dolphins team that's kind of rolling over right now. We saw Drake London also sit out that game after a late addition to the injury report. So, but both of those guys are low-end QB2 options this week.
Joe, wrap us up with talking about 2 rookie quarterbacks who might be on the field sooner than later. Dylan Gabriel looking terrible. Could this be an opportunity for Shedeur Sanders down the line in Cleveland? And let's talk about the Tyler Shuck, Spencer Rattler situation that's developing in New Orleans.
Yeah, I would guess Shuck is going to be the guy added in Superflex leagues if he wasn't added already. But now is your time to pick up Shedeur Sanders, because Dylan Gabriel, the Browns did say he is going to remain their starting quarterback. I will caution you, they are going on bye. So I would guess Kevin Stefanski has the right to reevaluate that. It might be a clean break, be able to put Shedeur Sanders in there after the bye. If you're in a super flex league where all the starting quarterbacks and some backups are rostered, now is the time to get on these 2 guys. Shuck might have been rostered already. He is probably going to start soon, but Shedeur Sanders, I think it's almost a guarantee he's going to get starts before the end of the season.
And then just quickly before we wrap it up, guys, if you could roster one of those 2 speculative guys, Shedeur Sanders or Tyler Shuck, I feel like we're back to the NFL draft talk here. Joe, pick one of them. You have to.
Shuck. Like,
yeah,
I think the Saints are a little bit better offense.
Yeah, Kellen Moore runs a faster paced offense. I think they have a little bit better weapons overall at wide receiver. We get to play in a dome. We don't have to deal with that Cleveland weather in November. The wind is howling. So, yeah, I'm with Joe. Let's go Shuck.
Yeah, and I'm going to go Tyler Shuck as well. I do worry about Tyler Shuck running a lot and taking away the most consistent New Orleans player that I'm actually using on a number of fantasy teams in Chris Olave and sort of lowering his ceiling a little bit. Rattler has sort of done a very good job with Olave, so I'm hoping Shuck can keep that going. But I do trust Kellen Moore. Great point about the weather. We covered a ton of names. If you want even more extensive waiver wire coverage, check out Tom Brawley's waiver wire article over at fantasypoints.com. Check out my waiver wire article over at fantasypoints.com. Check out our amazing rankings, our amazing tools, everything you need over at fantasypoints.com. If you want to level your game up, use the code Theo for 15% off our already discounted packages. Make sure you're tuned in for Fantasy Football Daily all week long. I have my guest show, my recap show, and then Graham Barfield joins me each and every week on a start-sit show. Check out School of Scott right here on Fantasy Points YouTube. Scott Barrett and I every single week, and on School of Scott podcast feed. And check out Dynasty Life. That's my Dynasty show as well. We got you covered, everything fantasy related over at Fantasy Points. We're going to help you crush your fantasy leagues this season.